Welcome to Feminist Question Time, brought to you by Women's Declaration International, which is the leading global organisation defending women's sex-based rights against the threats posed by gender identity ideology. There's more information on the website womensdeclaration.com, where you'll find our Declaration on Women's Sex-Based Rights, which has been signed by 37,810 people from 160 countries and is supported by 523 organisations. We have many volunteer activists and we have country contacts from every continent. Do join us as an activist or a country contact. Today, I'm really pleased to say we're going to hear from Heather and Kerri. They're going to talk about We the Women 2024, a USA event. Then we're going to hear from Menasche from USA. Her talk is called Fighting the Witch Hunters, Update on US Wrongful Termination Lawsuit. And then we're going to hear from Kerri Bruss. She's going to give us an update on what's happening, an overview from the United States. So we're going to go now to our first speakers. They are Heather and Kerri. And Kerri became a feminist at age 7 when she read the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment. And she manages communications for Radical Feminist PDX and runs the Facebook page Solidarity with Our Incarcerated Sisters. Heather started fighting gender ideology in 2017. She's a former WDI USA Lesbian Caucus member. She spoke at the WDI USA conference last year in San Francisco and runs a bi-weekly Radical Feminist Zoom group. And I'm so grateful to you coming on and so looking forward to your talk. So over to you, Heather and Kerri.
We the women remember, we the women are not afraid, we the women are relentless.
We the women are a phoenix, we the women rise from the ash, we the women plant seeds and nourish gardens of nettle and dandelion.
We the women sew and weave. We the women create tapestries of connection. We the women are the cloth.
We the women are getting stronger. We the women stand in solidarity.
We the women create. We the women support. We the women thrive.
We the women cast roots in rich soil. We the women lean together, blades of grass to make the meadow. We the women catch sun and flower.
We the women fight back. We the women love. We the women prevail.
We the women will gather July 19th through the 21st in the Pacific Northwest.
Hi, this is Heather Scalzi, We the Women event organizer. Thank you to WLRN for promoting our event, sure to spark the fires of change in our women's movement for our sex-based rights. Come to the beautiful Pacific Northwest this summer over the weekend of July 19th through 21st. To get your ticket, visit wethewomen.world. That's wethewomen.world.
Hi, I'm Heather.
And I'm Kerri.
And Frida, our third organizer, isn't able to be with us today, but she is in the chat. I wanted to give you a little bit information about ourselves. We are 3 women and friends and sisters in the fight against gender ideology. We've attended many different events throughout the US and done different actions together. And this summer we were at a all-female gathering. And we decided that we'd really like to put something together. You know, many of us have been to different actions throughout the United States. And we were really excited about this idea of putting something together. And we wanted it to be a little bit different than the things that we had done, you know, in the past and been to it in the past. We wanted to have a little bit more sisterhood and time together. We decided that we were going to put together We the Women, and that's how we were born.
This event is a 3-day outdoor camping style gathering in the Pacific Northwest, USA. We're asking women to arrive on Thursday evening, July 18th, to get ready to kick things off early Friday morning. This female-only gathering is focused on sex-based rights for women, and political strategies for advocacy for women's safety. The goal of this event is specific to political advocacy and activism, and we also want to allow time for community building and sisterhood. We have programmed in unstructured time with our workshops and activities so that women can hang out together in nature, getting to know each other, building trust in person. We'll have speed meet and greet, singing and stretching, some live music performed by female activists in our movement. And we've envisioned that this day is one that welcomes all interested female women who might be younger or older, of any faith or none, lesbians, bisexual women, straight women, urban or rural, women of any political affiliation. We the Women is explicitly a nonpartisan event, and this is not a public action.
Article 5 of the Declaration states that we are reaffirming women's right to peaceful assembly and association. And with that being said, we are vetting everyone that is coming to our event because we want it to be a place where we can hang out, relax, learn, get to know each other without a bunch of outside distractions. We are keeping the exact location secret, except for our ticket holders. And we're doing that, to keep our privacy and to keep the land we're on safe and the women safe. If you are interested in coming, please visit wethewomen.world.
We know this activism faced several challenges. Our venue, our original venue, which is owned by Feminist, was canceled. Our contract was canceled because of political differences, opinions on strategy, ideological purity, and basically fear. Luckily for us, we were able to find another venue. There'll be plenty of room for camping in tents. We can accommodate RVs and camper vans. And for those women who just don't camp, there are nearby indoor sleeping facilities that you can arrange.
Due to our venue changes, we have incurred some additional expenses, including travel for our speakers, then supplies and infrastructure that we had at the old venue, but don't have at the new venue. We are just 3 regular women who decided to put this together. This is a total grassroots movement, and we're working on a shoestring budget. And all the while trying to keep costs low for the women attending. We are not taking donations from big orgs, but rather asking everybody who is outraged by what's happening in the world today to help us. You can contribute to bringing women together so they can work effectively on the monster we call gender ideology. And the goal we're trying to reach is $10,000. And currently we're at 35% of that. I'm pretty stoked about that. Go us. For those of you who donate $100 or more, you'll get access to our digital toolbox. And those of you who donate $500 or more, not only will you get access to our digital toolbox, but also exclusive limited edition merch from us. If you'd like to make a donation, again, go to wethewomen.world.
We the Women is a single-sex gathering in open space focused on activist education, effective communication, and building political strategies in the movement to restore and protect sex-based rights. We'll kick off by looking at the history of feminism and also very briefly, and also about how we got to where we are now with the current legal conflation of sex and gender and the implications of gender ideology for the future and what we can do about it. This event will increase our agency as activists on personal, local, regional, state, national, and global levels. We want to have conversations and skill sharing, and we're going to role play and practice our skills so that we can improve and prepare our capacity to have those important one-on-one conversations. We're also going to have the opportunity to practice and prepare 2-minute speeches, the kind you might make at a school board hearing or a legislative session.
We have some resources, and they are things like fact sheets, statistics, materials to support your conversation, credible websites so that when somebody says, well, where'd you get that information? You can grab it out of your toolbox and whip out some facts for them. We have 3 different price tickets, which are standard price, subsidized, what's the other one?
Generous ticket buyer.
We have a generous ticket buyer, and we also have the ability for you, if you're not able to come, maybe you could donate a ticket to a sister who would love to come but otherwise couldn't make it. For those of you in the UK, we have set up Wise, and otherwise we have Venmo, PayPal, Zelle, credit, debit on the website, and all different kind of ways. We decided not to do crowdfunding because we all know that they X out women and our cause. So again, if you want to donate or you would like to pre-register, visit wethewomen.world, and really excited to be here. Thank you so much for having us, and we'll definitely see you in the breakout rooms.
Yes, we hope you'll join and support our efforts. We're striving to build an event with far-reaching feminist impacts and expect to make new friends, sisters, lovers. We welcome you.
Excited to see you.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
So our next speaker is Menasche. She's from the USA. She's a civil rights lawyer, radical feminist, lesbian and socialist, and founding member and coordinator of Feminists in Struggle, FIST. And the title of your talk is Fighting the Witch Hunters, Update on US Wrongful Termination Lawsuit. So thank you so much for coming.
So some of you might have seen my original talk about what happened to me and putting it in historical context. This is part 2. Basically, it's the conspiracy exposed, and it's an update of what's going on with my lawsuit. On May 11th, 2022, it's almost 2 years ago, I was fired without warning from a job that I'd had for almost 20 years as a civil rights attorney at Disability Rights California. And my crime was declaring that abortion bans harm women as a sex. I was also targeted for my outside political feminist activity with Feminists in Struggle, and also my involvement in the Green Party's battle to defend the Georgia Green Party for fighting for sex-based rights. And also, it turns out, and I wasn't as clear about this in the beginning, I suspected, but I wasn't clear about it. It turns out for me being an out lesbian. This was it turned out to be the old homophobia in a new shiny bottle of trans activism. For women who were not present at my first presentation, let me just quote really briefly the statement I made that triggered this attack on me and my firing a few days later. What happened was the executive director issued a statement supporting abortion rights. It was right before the Dobbs decision was released, and welcomed feedback from staff. So I took him up on his offer, and I said, oh, well, let me say, first of all, the statement, it excluded women. It said every other group that could possibly be affected by abortion, except women. So I responded by saying, so glad DRC, it's Disability Rights California, came up with a statement in defense of Roe. Thank you. Access to safe legal abortion is a life and death necessity for women as a biological sex across the board, regardless of race, economic class, gender identity, sexual orientation, even lesbians can be raped, or anything else, and an absolute prerequisite for equal female participation in our society. And then all hell broke loose. I was fired a few days later. On January 26, 2023, I filed a lawsuit for wrongful termination alleging sex and sexual orientation discrimination and retaliation. Just recently, the lawsuit was amended to add a claim for discrimination on the basis of political activity, California is really lucky, or California residents, workers are lucky because we have a provision in our labor code that says that employers are not supposed to interfere with the outside political activity of their employees. And they were definitely investigating me and doing just that. Trial in the case is now scheduled for October 25th, 2024 in the San Diego Superior Court. So we've been through many months of discovery. We're still in the process of discovery right now. And through that discovery, I learned a lot more about what was going on behind the scenes, the concerted effort to get me fired that I could never have even imagined. And I'm not naive, but it shocked me. So this is my update that I think has ramifications, and my case has ramifications for all of us who are on the front lines of the battle for women's liberation and against all the faces of backlash and misogynist reaction. Turns out my witch hunt was built up over months or even years. It involved at least 17 people at work, 15 of whom, all middle management, signed a several-page petition over a weekend immediately following my comments on abortion. That petition was directed at the executive director and the leadership team of Disability Rights California, urging that I be fired. The apparent ringleader, or the inspirer of all this, was a young trans-identified female lawyer brought in as a fellow for a trans advocacy project who had been investigating me way before the 2022 email exchange on abortion. And it was who was particularly disturbed about my lesbianism. Yeah, I have a real strong identification with the women who were persecuted in the Salem witch hunt after this. I've been reading on it and studying it. So this is a picture about what happened to women at Salem hundreds of years ago. So the petition started by saying, we write to reject the trans antagonistic comments. I don't know if people have heard that term, but that was a new one for me. The trans antagonistic comments that Ann Menasche made over work email to the entire DRC staff on the morning of Friday, May 6, 2022. And that was referring to the statements on abortion, which I read part of it, and then I continued to say females are affected by abortion bans. And that was pretty much all I said. Quote, unfortunately, this was not an isolated incident. A pattern has now emerged in which Ann uses staff-wide communications that are directed at trans, gender nonconforming, and non-binary members of our staff. Her statements indisputably violate DRC policy. And that was referring to their trans inclusion policy, and I'll talk about that later. Quote, to date, however, Menasche has acted with impunity. This letter seeks to change that, first and foremost for the sake of our colleagues who have been forced to suffer Menasche's abuses, but also for the sake of DRC itself. We believe Menasche's pattern of harassment is sufficiently pervasive to have created a hostile work environment, unquote. So what were my abuses? You read through the entire several-page letter, and basically there's three things. First, my statement that only females can get pregnant, only females need abortions. Shocking, right? The irony of this is beyond measure here. Similar statements as mine have been made by judges and lawyers across the country, especially now after the Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe v. Wade. Because the strongest argument for abortion rights post-Dobbs is sex discrimination or the equality argument. And this is especially the case if there is a state equal rights amendment. And one of these days I'll get to come here and talk about why the ERA is important. But here I was saying the argument that is being used across the country in defense of abortion rights. And it goes farther back than that. Decades ago, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said that she thought the equality argument was far better of a basis to secure abortion rights compared to the right to privacy that was the basis of the Roe decision. Most recently, there was a Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision in the case of Allegheny Reproductive Health Center versus Pennsylvania Department of Human Services. This was just in January of 2024. That said that pregnancy is a sex-based medical condition, quote unquote, from the court, and basically found that abortion restrictions, in this case, involved a ban on public funding for abortion. They discriminated on the basis of, oh, that dirty word, sex. This is really ironic, beyond ironic, because if the Pennsylvania Supreme Court justices worked for DRC, they would likely have been fired. Okay, so this is the stuff that blew me away. They cited a statement that I had made months earlier, that basically I'm a lesbian and that I'm only interested in intimate involvements with other women. Basically, that was my statement. Months earlier, I had communicated my quote unquote anti-trans sentiment by responding to an email sent to all the staff regarding an intersectional resource guide from the United Nations that defined lesbians as same gender attracted persons, quote unquote, same gender. I have no idea what that would mean, really. But anyway, I responded that this definition of lesbian was quite controversial and that many lifelong lesbians, including myself, define our lesbianism as same-sex attraction that has nothing to do with gender at all. And that's all I said. But months later, the petition cited this as evidence of my trans antagonism, and cited the trans-identified ringleader, as I call her. When Menasche, and this is a quote that was quoted in the petition, but it was a quote from this person. When Menasche says her lesbian identity is rooted in same-sex attraction, she impliedly excluding transgender women and trans people broadly from her sexuality, but also from the category of woman, stating one's very specific genitalia-based orientation is inappropriate for a work setting and especially inappropriate for an all-staff email. So in a nutshell, lesbians are obscene, right? Now, I've been doing lots of reading after all this happened. I read about Salem witch trials. I also got my hands on this incredible book called that talks about the story of Eve Adams, who was a lesbian leftist activist, an immigrant who lived in the United States of some period of time, was basically persecuted and prosecuted by the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover himself, because of her left-wing political activities. She knew Emma Goldman, and she was selling left-wing publications around the country. And then basically they set someone up to kind of try to date her. And the only thing what they got that they used to prosecute her was a little book she wrote that she just distributed to her friends, and she ended up giving a copy to the FBI agent, which was a little lesbian stories, really sweet little love stories. Because of that book, she was accused of obscenity, prosecuted, imprisoned, and then deported. And then she died in the Holocaust. She's a Jewish refugee. So anyway, here we are 100 years later, and lesbians are obscene. The witch hunters wrote the executive director that my statement should be considered in the context of my horrid anti-trans statements made outside of work related to my participation in FIST and in the Green Party. They quoted me from a FIST YouTube video where I said that I thought women had two enemies, trans activism and the Christian right. And also from an internal Green Party document defending the Georgia Party from expulsion for its gender critical views. And that the statement they quoted was, persons born female escaping from male violence should not be forced to share intimate spaces and shower facilities with people with penises. That was my quote. Oops. Under California law, employers are not supposed to interfere with employees outside political activity. That's a violation of the labor code. This petition went to the executive director and the manager of our litigation unit. It was considered, admittedly, by the head of the litigation unit. That petition was considered in the decision to fire me. So we added that to our complaint. So there were several depositions taken of the top management at Disability Rights California. And they basically accused me of knowingly violating the trans inclusion policy. And there was two parts of the policy they said I violated. One is just general prohibition on harassment. They're basically referencing biological sex was harassment and under this view. And then I was also accused of violating the policy on pronoun use, even though there was no pronouns involved. There were zero pronouns. It was just nouns and adjectives. That was it. And the executive director basically said what I had said that was a problematic, and the assistant, the person who was right under them, who heads up litigation. My bad words were, quote, woman as a biological sex. That was a bad word. That's the phrase that was a bad word. And my lawyer pointed out that I included trans men, quote unquote, because I said regardless of gender identity. So they were certainly included, but they didn't want to be included as females. And then, of course, I excluded trans women because we know how frequently they get pregnant. Anyway, it was a pretty amazing these were very interesting and amazing depositions. But it was those words, now women and female and biological, that were the hate words according to GRC management. It was virtually never okay to specify sex because that was exclusionary and we needed to be inclusive. And that meant, when you think about it, there's no way you could ever fight sex discrimination if you thought you were of any kind. If you thought you were being paid less or denied a promotion versus your male co-workers, you wouldn't really be able to talk about it because you couldn't say sex. You couldn't say, well, I'm being discriminated against as a woman. You couldn't say that because those are all prohibited. This is how far this insanity has gone. So witch hunts only end when enough people speak out and say enough is enough. That's true with the McCarthy era. That's true with the Salem witch trials. It's true across the board. And that's what we need to do, is we need to start speaking up and fighting back. So I'm asking for political support here from all my sisters and men who are allies of feminism to sign the statement of solidarity that's on the defendfeminist.net website. We're also seeking organizational endorsements and to stay on top of developments. And I have to update the site still, but we'll be adding the new complaint, a little more information. But the defendfeminist.net has information about this. And Feminist and Struggle website often carries updates as well. And I will be speaking at our conference that's coming up July 5th to 7th in the San Diego area on a panel with Thistle Peterson and some other people, other women to speak about the witch hunts and how to fight them. So we're going to actually have a panel at our conference. So I really appreciate having the opportunity to be here. Just end with my favorite quote. Remember the dignity of your womanhood. Do not appeal, do not beg, do not grovel. Take courage, join hands, stand beside us, fight with us. There's the witch. I'm the witch. Trial scheduled October 25th, 2024 in the San Diego Superior Court. Stay tuned, and thank you for having me.
Okay, so we're going to now go on to Kerri Bruss, and Kerri is a retired nurse, proud mother of two, lifelong feminist. She's an active volunteer with WDI USA and wears many hats, serves as the US country contact, and she served on the original steering committee. While a member of the steering committee, Kerri did much of the conceptual heavy lifting behind the organization's Equality for All Act, EFAA, intended to be an alternative to the egregiously misnamed US Equality Act, which, if passed, would significantly harm women, children, lesbian, gay, and bisexual people by adding gender identity to the list of protected characteristics in US civil rights law. Thankfully, that bill appears to be dead. Since then, Kerri has stood up with and for women in boots on the ground actions across the country, has been involved with the grassroots organization of WDI USA. I'm going to guess it says such events. In 2022, she was the lead organizer of the Midwest segment of the global prison protest held on International Women's Day in Chicago, which also promoted D-Trans Awareness Day, contributed to the organization of Sisters for Sisters weekend held in Madison, WI, and was one of the 3 women who organized the Chicago portion of Kelly J. Keene's Let Women Speak US tour.
It's an honor and a pleasure to be here to present an update from the US in the context of our shared efforts to defend the sex-based rights of women and girls and to ensure that our children are safeguarded from the harms of gender identity ideology. But first, I'm going to share a bit of relevant background. As I'm sure you're aware, the US is a vast country comprised of 50 states, the District of Columbia, and US territories. As was mentioned in the US Country Report, included in WDI's book, Women's Rights, Gender Wrongs, federal law is created at the national level and is informed by the US Constitution. State law exists in parallel to, and sometimes in conflict with, federal law. Where there is a direct conflict, federal law generally prevails, except where state law affords residents additional rights when that is presumed to take precedence. As a result, almost all legal decisions are open to interpretation and legal challenge. Complicating matters even further, as the report also references, in the US legal system, executive orders carry the weight of legislation without being law. They are a way for a president to enforce his or her will on specific issues where legislation would be unlikely to pass in Congress and can be undone at the stroke of a pen by a subsequent president. On his first day in office in January 2021, President Biden signed an EO redefining sex to include gender identity throughout federal administrative law. As a result of this EO, and a series of other such measures the Biden administration has subsequently issued, legal rights and protections intended for women and girls are now broadly accessible to any male who claims a female identity. Resistance to these challenges are currently playing out in state houses and courts all over the country, which brings us back to the more recent updates portion of this presentation. While by no means a comprehensive review, I'll touch on significant or interesting developments that have occurred over the past few months to give you an idea of how our shared goals are progressing here in the US. With regards to Article 9 of the Declaration, our report documented that children can be recognized as the opposite sex socially and be subjected to puberty blockers, wrong sex hormones, and gender assignment surgeries, although rules vary from state to state. According to data compiled by the Movement Advance Project, 24 states have now passed laws restricting or banning the medicalization of minors, though many may not be in effect yet, primarily due to legal challenges. While the decision to overturn Roe has abolished the constitutional right to abortion, the state-by-state battle for abortion rights is far from over. Since Roe was overturned in 2022, 14 states have enacted near total abortion bans, while 2 have banned abortion past roughly 6 weeks of pregnancy. Other states have enacted laws or held ballot referendums to protect abortion rights. In a handful of other states, the future of abortion is in flux. Mine is one of them. The Center for Reproductive Rights has published a handy resource titled After Roe Fell, Abortion Laws by State, which is updated in real time. Anyone interested can click through this tool to learn about all the bans and restrictions currently on the books in each state. On January 24th, the Ohio Senate voted to override the governor's veto of the SAFE Act, a bill that bans the medicalization of minors and protects single-sex sports. Within a week of the override, ACLU of Ohio announced its intent to challenge the law. The suit filed on March 26 asked the court to strike the law down before it is scheduled to take effect on April 24th, and specifically targets the law's medical care restrictions. On January 24th, Redux broke a disturbing story out of New York, reporting that a former female inmate was suing the city after being repeatedly sexually assaulted by a male inmate who had been housed in the women's section of Rikers Island. The inmate says she was subjected to repeat abuse by the man, who was permitted to stay in women's protective custody after being instructed by Department of Corrections staff to claim a trans identity. Worse, according to the suit, DOC records show that at the time the male entered the women's housing unit, he was being investigated for potential involvement in a prostitution ring operating within Rikers. The ring involved staff and inmates, and the DOC was reportedly aware that he was likely moved to the female unit to facilitate his procurement of female inmates to pimp out to male inmates and staff. And that's a quote. Under the Protection of Women in Olympic and Amateur Sports Act, a bill introduced to both houses of Congress on February 1st, governing bodies recognized by the U.S. Olympic Committee would be prohibited from allowing men with a woman identity to participate in any athletic event intended for females. The bill also modifies eligibility requirements for amateur sports governing organizations. On February 2nd, the New York Times published a comprehensive investigative piece about detransitioners titled, "As Kids They Thought They Were Trans, They No Longer Do," that applies much needed scrutiny to the gender-affirming model. The author, Pauline Paul, also published a brief follow-up piece titled, "The Courage to Admit You Don't Know," addressing common claims from those who favor the current treatment model that very few people detransition. Of note, Elizabeth, our chief of staff, wrote a letter to the editor in response to Paul's piece that the New York Times published on February 10th. This marked the first time WDI USA has been published in the Times, and we, not to mention Elizabeth, are quite pleased about it. On February 5th, Redux broke another disturbing story, this one out of Montana, in which a family accused the state's Child Protective Services of kidnapping their troubled 14-year-old daughter after she began to identify as a boy, a social transition they did not support. Krista and Todd Kolstad spoke to Redux about their ordeal, revealing that the child initially had been temporarily removed from their care as a result of their failure to affirm, but that Montana Child and Family Services has since petitioned the court to transfer custody to the child's long estranged biological mother in Canada. Additionally, the parents are reportedly facing arrest after speaking to the media after having been ordered by a judge to remain silent. Also on February 5th, the Free Press published a piece about another gender clinic whistleblower who has come forward, this one from Tacoma, Washington. Therapist Tamara Pitsky tells how she could no longer go along with the pressure to transition her patients, even those with extreme vulnerabilities and comorbidities, without any examination of the root cause of their distress. At the time her story came out, Tamara had left her job at one of Washington State's biggest hospital systems and was just 3 weeks into her new one. Mere days after publication, her new boss requested her resignation. Tamara believes that publicly sharing her opinions about youth gender medicine contributed to her firing. In Massachusetts, on February 8th, the girls' basketball team of Collegiate Charter forfeited at halftime against Kip Academy because the team included a 6-foot-plus tall male player who the coach felt was causing injuries to his players repeatedly. Of course, the inclusion of a male player with a female gender identity on a girls' team is consistent with MIA rules. On February 14th, a bipartisan group of lawmakers introduced a bill that would establish a task force to examine the conditions and experiences of Black women and girls in America. Unfortunately, the Protect Black Women and Girls Act includes language that defines those women and girls as individuals who identify as a woman, female, or femme. On February 19th, Reem Al-Salem, UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls, publicly released her letter to the US government regarding the proposed rule changes to Title IX and the potential negative impact that its revision could have on the partition of most women and girls in sport. It's definitely worth a read in full. Quoting from an article published in the Washington Free Beacon on February 21st, legislation introduced last week by Democrats, which refers to pregnant women as birthing people and non-binary persons and persons of transgender experience, whatever that is, would require anyone involved in maternity care, from hospital cleaning staff to doctors and nurses, to undergo semi-annual training to undo their multiple layers of potential biases, that pregnancy and childbirth are female experiences. The article includes quotes from Kerri in opposition to the bill, as well as from Cynthia Cravens, a California Democrat and then candidate for state Senate. Cravens was running to unseat incumbent Senator Scott Wiener, the politician responsible for many of the anti-woman and children bills that have become law in California. Sadly, she lost her primary in March. I'd also like to mention the ongoing statewide ballot initiative proposed by Protect Kids California, an organization advocating for policies that promote all children's rights and well-being. If enough signatures are gathered by May 15th, the initiative would require schools to notify parents regarding children's mental health concerns identified in school settings, including gender identification issues, protect girls' sports and spaces, and prohibit puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, mastectomies, and genital surgeries for minors. Wish them the best of luck out there. Also in February, Democrats in the state of Illinois introduced a bill that would change the definition of abused child to include a parent who denies their child gender-affirming services, which per the bill falls under the heading necessary medical care. Fortunately, the bill is dead, For now, anyway. Apparently, it was not advanced out of the Rules Committee, so did not get a hearing in the full House this legislative session. On February 21st, Kerri tweeted about a big win for free speech in U.S. schools and the material reality of sex. The case she is referring to is Parents Defending Education versus the Linn-Mar School District in Iowa, which recently was resolved in a settlement agreement after PDE prevailed in the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals. Linn-Mar agreed to rescind and not reinstate the portion of the policy that prohibits an intentional and or persistent refusal by staff or students to respect a student's gender identity. Moving on, continuing a legal battle that began with the nationwide reversal of Roe, Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin filed a petition urging the Wisconsin Supreme Court to protect the right to abortion. The organization is asking the court to answer this question. Does the Wisconsin Constitution protect the right to access abortion care and a provider's right to provide abortion care? This is all well and good. However, not once does Planned Parenthood's petition refer to women, the only Wisconsinites who would ever have need of an abortion. In an article published by the City Journal on February 27th, titled Stacking the Deck, Leon Sapir writes, the U.S. Endocrine Society is updating its clinical practice guidelines on gender-affirming care. ES, however, appears to be putting its thumb on the scale in favor of medical interventions by appointing experts with serious conflicts of interest to its guideline development group, ignoring its own standards for how to write trustworthy medical recommendations and trying to keep the process hidden from the public. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Excuse me. Also on February 27th, the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals confirmed that it has overturned a federal judge's June decision blocking Indiana's SB 480. This means that the state's ban on the medicalization of minors is now allowed to take effect. On March 8th, Next Golf announced, and I quote, a significant update to the eligibility policy for the Next Women's Pro Tour. Effective immediately, competitors must be a biological female at birth. Sorry, it's a quote. The decision underscores the organization's commitment to maintaining the integrity of women's professional golf and ensuring fair competition. The Free Press recently published a story that could have huge implications for women's sport in the US. 16 female athletes are suing the NCAA over its discriminatory policies that allow men to compete as women, in violation of their rights under Title IX and the Constitution. The lawsuit seeks to change the rules, rendering males ineligible to compete against females. It demands that the NCAA revoke all awards given to male athletes in women's competitions and reassign them to their female contenders, and also asks for monetary compensation. Icons, founded by FQT's mother of swimmer Kim Jones, has announced exclusive funding support for the lawsuit. Congratulations are in order to the state of Wyoming, whose legislature passed the Children Gender Change Prohibition Bill on March 14th. The bill, formerly called Chloe's Law, after detransitioner Chloe Cole, bans the medicalization of minors in most situations and also allows for various medical boards to revoke licenses for nurses and pharmacists who break it. Next, I'll speak about an interesting situation currently unfolding in New York. In late February, Nassau County Executive Bruce Blakeman signed an executive order prohibiting male athletes from competing against girls at all 100 sports facilities run by the county, effective immediately. This prompted New York's Attorney General Letitia James to send a cease and desist letter calling the ban discriminatory and transphobic. The decision sparked heated public debate and several lawsuits against Nassau County, the most recent one by the New York Civil Liberties Union. To his credit, Blakeman is standing firm. It will be interesting to see how the situation plays out, particularly if other counties opt to take similar action. A 13-year-old middle school boy who identifies as a girl has filed a federal lawsuit against the Elkhorn School District in Walworth County, Wisconsin, for denying him access to girls' restrooms for the past 2 years. The complaint alleges the Elkhorn Area School District violated his rights under Title IX and the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. The boy apparently finds the district's gender support plan, allowing him access to faculty restrooms for the past 2 years, unsatisfactory, as he wishes to be treated like every other girl at school. The Minnesota Court of Appeals has handed a win to USA Powerlifting in its fight against J.C. Cooper, a man with a woman identity, by sending the case back to the lower court. Last year, the district court ruled that USAPL violated the Minnesota Human Rights Act by excluding him from the women's division in 2019, asserting that the organization does not have a legitimate, non-discriminatory reason for its decision. The appeals court rejected that argument, concluding that USAPL's assertion that it excluded Cooper from the women's division because his male physiology gave him an unfair advantage over athletes with female physiology is a non-discriminatory reason. On March 26th, the U.S. Supreme Court heard oral arguments over whether to limit access to the abortion drug mifepristone nationwide. The federal lawsuit was originally filed against the FDA in November 2022 on behalf of a coalition of physicians who oppose abortion. In response to the federal court's injunction pausing FDA approval, the Department of Justice filed an appeal seeking an immediate stay of the decision. The appellate panel then issued a complicated ruling on the injunction, siding in part with the FDA and part with the anti-abortion coalition. The decision allowed partial access to the drug while the federal case played out, but with new restrictions on how it could be dispensed. The ruling led the DOJ to appeal to the Supreme Court in hopes of fully restoring access to the drug. Ultimately, the Supreme Court granted a full stay, while the legal challenges to the lower court ruling restricting access continued. The 7-2 decision preserved the status quo, at least for now. Excuse me, and here we are. The Supreme Court decision is unlikely to be issued before the end of June. In yet another breaking news story, Redux reports that a woman incarcerated at the Women's Correctional Center in Washington State has come forward with allegations of having been sexually assaulted by her cellmate, a man who was transferred to the women's prison in 2021, and whose criminal history includes sexual offenses and violent assault. The female inmate, known only as Mary, reports that she became increasingly uncomfortable with Christopher Williams' behavior towards her, which had a near constant sexual undertone, and progressed to include threats of sexual violence, the presentation of strap-on dildos with a request that she use them on him, and touching her in her sleep. After Mary's PREA report was determined to be substantiated, Williams was taken into segregation and eventually moved out of her cell. However, she reports that his intimidation of her has continued. On April 2nd, as expected, Wisconsin's Democratic Governor Tony Evers vetoed a bill banning male high school athletes from participation in female sports. Representative Barb Dittrich the bill's lead author, blasted what she called Evers' misogynist veto and claimed the governor once again stands against women. Sadly, Wisconsin Republicans likely don't have enough votes to override the veto. Late last year, Evers also vetoed a bill that would have banned the medicalization of minors. Okay, at least 20 states have approved a version of a blanket ban on male athletes playing on female K-12 and collegiate level sports teams statewide. But a Biden administration proposal to forbid such outright bans is set to be finalized this year after multiple delays and much pushback. As proposed, the rule would establish that blanket bans would violate Title IX, the landmark legislation enacted in 1972. The claim is patently absurd, considering that Title IX prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex, not gender. However, it appears the Biden administration may be getting election year cold feet about finalizing at least some of the proposed regulations, as even the Washington Post is forced to admit these policies are not popular with Americans, and polling consistently demonstrates that clear majorities, including a sizable slice of Democrats, oppose allowing male athletes to compete on girls' and women's teams. And finally, I'm pleased to announce that WDI USA has filed a friend of the court brief in a case called Olympus Spa versus Armstrong. At issue in the case is the ability of a female-only nude spa to exclude men. A man named Haven Wilvich had been excluded from the spa and brought the spa before the Washington State Human Rights Commission. He won, and the spa fought back by filing a federal lawsuit. In its order dismissing the spa's complaint, the district court for the Western District of Washington repeatedly used the phrase transgender women with male genitalia, uncritically and without explanation. The case is now before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. As we say in our brief, it is truly a testament to where we are today as a society that it must be said in the context of federal civil rights litigation that women don't have penises.